so we will be finished in 2 hours' time, and that's going to include a load of content and also time for you to ask questions. As I said, try and have a really open mind. Be careful of, sometimes you might hear something, oh, I know this. And that's very dangerous, because if you say to yourself, I know something, the mind tends to shut down. I want to keep your mind really open to the possibilities of what things could be for you. So what I'd ask you to do is to maybe ask yourself, okay, what don't I know? I might know about this, but what don't I know? And what's the extra 10% that I don't know? Now, I'm a great believer in repetition. There's an event I go to, I'm in a mastermind group in America. It's not a property one, it's a business thing, and they have an event in 5 years. And many of the people they have as well, it's the same concept, but each time we go at a deeper level, and I get different things, I get ideas and inspiration. So I think repetition is a really good thing to do. And I always go with the mindset, okay, what's the bit I don't know yet? What are the things I'm going to pick up? And sometimes that little tiny extra 10% is what makes all the difference with your property investing or whatever you're trying to do in life. So look for the bit you don't. Be careful of that, oh, I know that. I also have some secret content. Now, obviously, you right now are what. If you're not watching it when we're broadcasting, you're obviously watching the video. But what I'm going to do is I've got a little bit of secret content that I'm only going to do in the live broadcasts. Why am I doing that? Well, look, with the best will in the world, this is incredibly valuable information. But because people haven't had to pay for it, because we're doing it completely free, I said you should imagine you spent £2,000 to do this training, then it's going to make you more focused and make you want to turn up. But you know what? With the best one in the world, someone might say, yeah, I'll watch the video sometime, and they never get around to it. And if you don't go through this training, you won't understand this properly, and you won't be able to start using this in your property investing to massively increase your results. So I want you to go through the training. So I'm really encouraging you to come and participate live, because you've got this extra little special secret content that is going to be edited out of the video. So what you need to do is you need to go to the, if you haven't already done this, go to the optionsmasterclass.co.uk website, register your details there, and you'll be able to access the recordings. You'll also be able to access the notes that I'm going to share, so you don't have to write everything down. You can sit and listen and pull out the key points for you, knowing that you've got the slides. And usually in the slides, I think my team normally put blanks in, so you can kind of fill the blanks in, which is a great way of actively listening to make sure you are paying attention, and that will get you better results, basically. So I would really encourage you to go and join that. And when you join that, you get the opportunity to come and join a private Facebook group where you can go in, and we're going to continue the conversation between these live launches. You've got questions and things. Me and my coach is going to be in those groups, answering your questions, helping you out, sharing case studies, inspiring, asking you to share your key learnings and things. It's going to be a great little community of people who are interested in this. You get free access to that. You need to come and register at optionsmasterclass.co.uk. So if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or something like that, make sure you go and register. And when you get into that page, you're going to be able to download the slides and really make the most out of this training. Now, whenever you watch or listen to anyone, I really think you should check them out and make sure they kind of know what they're talking about. Anybody could do a YouTube video or Facebook post, etc. And I encourage you to go out there and watch lots of people, listen to people. I don't have all the answers, lots of great trainers out there, but you really need to understand that people actually have the background and knowledge and credibility to be able to help you move forward. So very briefly, let me tell you, I've been investing in property since 1995. I bought a house to live in as a recent graduate from Birmingham University, and I just secured a job at Cadbury's in Birmingham as a graduate trainee. And I bought a little two-bedroom terrace property, 2 bedroom, 2 reception rooms, and 2 of my friends from uni came to rent for me. So the rent they paid pretty much covered the bill, so I was kind of living for free. I also had a part-time nightclub business I was running, students, a great fun business to do in those days. I had money building up on my business bank account. So I actually moved out of my first house and bought a second house, slightly closer to Cadbury's than where I work, and I rented my first house out as a student HMO in 1998. So I've been doing this a very long time. And I realised when I got that first property that I rented out, I realised that property is a bit like owning your very own cash machine. You see, at the end of each month, after you paid the rent, the mortgage side, the insurance, the maintenance, all the bills and things, there should be some money left over. Not just that month, but the next month and the next month. And I thought this was amazing because to get paid from Cadbury's, I had to turn up every day. And I had to give them value. And then they'd pay me. I didn't turn up, I didn't get paid. Fair enough. But I had to do hardly anything for my property. It was a great property, good condition, great tenants. I hardly heard from them. And yet I was getting paid every single month. So I thought, this is great. I'm going to buy a few more. And I bought a few more. And by 2001, I was able to leave my corporate job. And that was a bit of a scary time. It was I remember the day I walked home, having given in my notice, I was kind of literally walking on cloud nine, really happy. I was also a bit nervous, oh my God, what have I done? I went to university to get a dream job like this, and it took me a lot of work to get that great job, and I've just handed it all in. What, am I crazy? And I thought, you know what, I just want to have more time for myself. I love travel. I love to travel as much as I can, and frankly, 5 weeks of holiday for an employee is just not enough. And I think one of the things we've seen in 2020 and what happened because of the COVID-19 pandemic is that actually, even if you have a great job, you never know what might happen. Many people were put on furlough, many people lost their jobs, and I think that's a great lesson and a wake-up call to all of us that you need more than one income stream. And that's why property is such a powerful investment tool. If you can have a number of properties producing income for you, you can replace your income, which is what I did. That's one of the best reasons for investing in property. But the problem is you need to have deposits and you need to get mortgages, and that's what I had to do, and that's what most people think. And actually what I'm going to share with you in this training is a way you can acquire property, get cash flow and equity growth on property that you don't even own. That means you don't need to put in big deposits. That means you don't need to get mortgages. And this is an absolute game changer when you understand this. So I left my work in 2001 and it took me a couple of years. By 2003, so after 8 years, I'd completely replaced my former income from Cadbury's. And I realised I'd done okay, but I also made a few mistakes in there. And I thought it's a kind of a lonely journey. All my friends were working, they all thought I was a bit crazy. None of my family had ever invested apart from their own homes. So what I decided to do was start a networking group. Because I went online, so if there was any other way I could connect with other people. I was going to a business networking meeting in the morning. You know, we have breakfast, we recommend clients to people, and I met a great solicitor, a great mortgage broker, accountant, brilliant. The only problem was none of those people did property. I wanted to get around property people. And so I went online, there was no networking, so I set up the very first networking anywhere in the UK. I called it Property Investors Network. And that started to grow. We now have 50 meetings around it. It's the largest and longest running network. In 2003, I started to teach other people what I had learned. And in 2007, I got very serious about that and I created my mastermind program. The concept being it's not just about knowledge, it's about getting around a group of like-minded people who've all invested in themselves and they are invested in their success and invested in helping everyone in the group. And you know, you just go onto YouTube, type in Property Mastermind, you'll see the hundreds of case studies of people who've had life-changing results in a very short amount of time. And many of those people, the tools I'm going to teach you on this training, purchase options and purchase options, have been some of the strategies and tools that they have used. Now, I'm still actively investing in property for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think, well, why wouldn't I? I know what to do. There are some brilliant deals out there, so I'm still actively investing. But also, I think it's important to keep up to date. Now, I could have stopped years ago, but I think it's important. I'm teaching other people. I need to be there at the cutting edge, learning what's going on, teaching other people. That's why I still invest in property. And I've used these tools myself personally over the last 15 years, and so have many of my students. Not all of my students, obviously, but hundreds of my students have successfully used the strategies I'm teaching you. And yet, there are some people out there saying, that's not possible, they don't work. Well, you take your choice, what you believe, but we're doing this, it absolutely works. This is risk. So I'm going to jump straight into this If you've downloaded the notes, you can follow us all the time. Go to www.options masterclass register. You'll come to the webpage where we're broadcasting this. There's going to be some downloads there for you. You'll be able to get the notes from today and follow along. So, what is a purchase option? So this is where you find a seller, someone who wants to sell a property or a piece of land or whatever it might be. By the way, you can buy businesses like this as well. You find someone's got something to sell, and you have the right to buy that asset, but you're not obligated to purchase. And that's pretty good for you. You can buy it if you want. The seller has to sell it to you, but if you don't want to buy it, you can walk away from the sale. Now, you don't get that right forever. There's a time period called the option period within which you have the right to buy that property. And you fix the price today. It's called an option, called a strike price. In fact, you can actually do this in the stock market. You can get options on shares. So it's a very similar concept if you're familiar with that. So there's a fixed price today, a certain time period within which you can actually make that purchase if you want to make the purchase. Now, for you to get this right, to buy at this price within a fixed time period, there must always be a consideration to make it a legally binding contract. It's an upfront option fee. Now, you might have heard the expression buy a house for £1. It's not actually correct. It's very difficult to buy a house for £1. It's not impossible. I believe, I think Liverpool Council was once selling some of their ex-council properties off for £1. However, it was a whole street of properties completely dilapidated. No one would want to live there. You need to spend about £30,000 to get the property in livable state, and it would only be worth about £30,000 then. So, but in the past, we have been able to buy property for £1. But that's not what we're talking about here. It's the right to buy that property for whatever that fixed price might be. So the price might be £200,000 within a 3-year or 5-year time period, and you're paying £1 to get that right. By the way, sometimes the upfront option fee might be a lot more than £1. It might be several thousand, even tens of thousands of pounds. And sometimes amateur investors make the mistake. They think, well, if it's more than £1, I'm not going to do it. And it really depends on the deal. But generally, it's £1 that we pay to make it legally binding. Now, options should also be what we call assignable. So you've got the right to buy this asset if you want to, within a certain time period at a fixed price. But if you don't want to buy it, you can assign it on to someone else. Now, by the way, take on options, generally you want to do it in a company structure. You can put them in your own name, and you should put them generally in a company structure. And the reason is, if you decide to assign it on to someone else, which you may or may not do, but if you do that, and there is a profit, because you might have the right to buy it, let's say 200,000, and let's say in a period of time it might be worth 280, let's say, you sell it on to someone else for 240, so they're getting a really good deal, there'd be a £40,000 profit there. Now, if it was in your own name, you would pay income tax on that. And if you're a successful investor, you might well be a higher rate taxpayer. That's a lot of tax to pay. If you did it at a company, it's going to be corporation tax, which is a lower rate. So generally, is the best way to do it. And if you want to buy that property later in your own name, you can always assign it to yourself if you want to do it. So just a little tip there. Generally, if you want to buy or control property in an option in a company name. Now, how do we use this? Well, most land, you see the big developers, the big house builders, they don't go and buy land. They go and speak to a landowner, they secure an option on the property, giving them the right to buy, and they often go and get planning permission, and they'll land bank it. They won't use it now, they'll hold on to it for the future. And if they buy, which usually they do, the landowner gets a big chunk of cash, but they don't need to use the cash now. So that's often how options are used on land. They're also used in commercial property. And in fact, options have been in commercial property for many, many years. And I'll give you in the third part of this live masterclass, I'll talk about commercial property and how we can work with commercial agents to find property that's suitable for options and purchase these options. So that's the main thing you can use it for, really, is commercial property. And the thing with purchase options is it buys you time. So you've got the right to buy this property within this time period. Remember, the seller cannot sell to anyone else. They have to sell to you. So you've got exclusivity on that for a certain period of time. At the end of that time period, obviously, control goes back to the owner. Now, the way you can use this is often called a lockout agreement. So you agree with the owner, you're going to buy a property, you need a bit of time to do some stuff, and this gives you the peace of mind that in the meantime, they can't go and sell it to someone else. So some of the ways you can use this, if you are packaging up property deals to sell to other people, and it's a great way to make money, by the way. If you find good deals, you're probably not going to use all of the deals you find yourself. And so rather than walking away from a good deal, you can package it up and sell to someone else. Now, if you do that, you do need to be what's called a compliant deal sourcer. But most important thing is, once you've found these deals, you want to secure it to make sure by the time you're looking for someone to sell it to, the owner hasn't sold it to someone else. So it's often called a lockout agreement, and it's the best way if you are selling it. So if you're selling deals, you absolutely need to be using purchase options. Maybe you need to apply for planning permission. Maybe you've identified something that could be knocked down and developed, or something could be converted into apartments, or you're changing the use, you need to get planning permission. It would be risky to buy something hoping that you get planning permission, because you may or you may not. So what you can do is you can agree to buy it from the owner, you fix the price, you've got a period in which you can do that. You can then go and get the planning permission. Here's something that not a lot of people know. Anybody can apply for planning permission on anything. So you don't have to own something to apply for planning permission. You could apply for planning permission on Buckingham Palace if you wanted. Now, it's unlikely they'd grant that permission, and even if permission was granted, only the Queen could use that because she owns Buckingham Palace. But the point I'm trying to make is, you could control the property before you buy it, get the planning, and only once you know the planning has been agreed, then you buy the property. So you can use purchase options to reduce the risk that you have when investing in property. Maybe you're looking to buy a property in an Article 4 area. If you're doing HMOs, you'll know that Article 4 has been introduced by local councils who don't want any more HMOs, and many investors make the mistake that, oh, if it's Article 4, I can't get planning permission. Well, if you apply for planning permission, most councils will automatically reject, but if it meets the criteria, then actually you might win planning on appeal. Again, it will be risky to buy a property and then apply. So instead you can get an option, control it, apply, appeal, and once you get planning, if you get planning, you then buy the property. And maybe you've got a property where something needs to be fixed before you buy it. Sometimes you see properties that are marked as cash only because maybe they're not mortgageable, maybe they've got some subsidence, or maybe they haven't got a kitchen or bathroom so people can't live there, or maybe they've got a short lease, or maybe they've got Japanese not whatever it is, you can't get finance on it. But if you have an option, you can control that asset, you can fix the problem, make it mortgageable, and then buy at a cash price. So I'm going to go into a bit more detail on this, but I just want to stimulate your thinking right now to understand how you can use this. So a great thing you can do with purchase options is add value to a property before you buy. Most people think they need to buy something first, and then they add value to it. But instead, you can control that property with a purchase option, and then add value before you buy it. Why would you do that? Well, basically, let's say you want to get, as I said before, planning permission, or you want to do some work to a property. The money you spend is going to increase the value. And so once you raise the value of the property that's higher than the purchase price you're buying it for, there are certain strategies you can use where you can arrange the finance to buy that property based on the value instead of the purchase price. Now, just to be really clear here, normally when you buy a property, the mortgage you get will be based on the value or the purchase price, whichever is the lower. Okay, so if you're buying a property and the value happens to be higher than the purchase price, most lenders will give you a mortgage based on the purchase price. However, there are some creative ways, and we're going to talk about there's probably, I think, in the fourth part of this live masterclass about how you can actually fund deals using very little of your own money, because you can get finance based on the value you've created rather than just the purchase price. But again, if you went to a normal mortgage broker, they'll say, no, you can't do that, because they don't understand these strategies. What this means is you need to put less money into the deals that you do. Less deposit money, because you've added value, you're getting a mortgage based on a high value instead of just the mortgage rate. So it works really, really well. Now I'm going to give you some examples of this. I'm going to come to the flip chart and just run through some figures. So one of my students, a guy called Nick Salmon, really fantastic guy. He did our mastermind program, and we teach lots of different strategies on mastermind, but one of the strategies is basically, one of the tools rather, is options and purchase options. And Nick started with HMOs, went on to bigger developments, and he found an office block that was empty and on the market for, I think it was about £415,000. Now, Nick had identified that there was potential to take this empty office block, get planning permission, and convert it into 8 apartments. With planning permission in place, this block was worth, I think it was 560,000, something like that. So he then came to Crowd Property, which is one of my other businesses that we set up, property investors, setting up a business for property investors. And based on the higher value, we knew how much Nick was buying it for, but I think they did a loan of something like, I think it was something like 400 or 405,000, because the value was 560, and so the loan that Nick got was very close to the purchase price, maybe 93% or something like that. Whereas most traditional banks and lenders say, well, you're buying it for this, you've got to put 25, 30% in, and we'll give you a 75% mortgage based on that purchase price. So hopefully you can understand this. If you could add value before you buy, it minimizes the amount of money you have to put into the deal. So this should start to get you thinking creatively that there are a number of things you can do. Likewise, we've had a number of students who have actually found properties in Article 4 areas where normally they'd have to get planning permission. Now, most investors will not look in and cannot get planning. That's not correct. Now, all councils will have their own criteria. For example, it might be that they say within a certain radius of the property, you can't have more than 10 or 20% HMOs. It does vary from council to council. But not all Article 4 areas are chock-a-block full of HMOs. There's certain areas there's lots of HMOs. They've kind of introduced articles, they don't really want more HMOs in certain areas. But if it meets the criteria, most councils will reject it automatically, but on appeal, you can potentially get it. So what you can do is you agree a price for this property, and most other investors will not even spot this property because they'll assume, Article 4, I can't turn a normal house into an HMO without planning, I won't get it because of Article 4. So they don't even, it doesn't even hit their radar. They don't even think about this deal. And yet, because you know this specialist knowledge, you can work out, will you get planning or not? You can go secure it, a normal purchase, because in Article 4, often prices are really inflated for existing HMOs because landlords know that there aren't many more HMOs that are going to come into the area because Article 4 is there. So there's a premium on them. But we're buying a normal house, 3-bedroom, we can convert into an HMO. There's not the interest, not the focus. We can get that through a good deal, secure it based on a purchase option. We then get the planning permission, and only once we've got the planning, only once we know we can convert it into an HMO, then do we buy it. And by the way, when it's got the planning for an HMO, that's going to cause a massive uplift in the value. So I hope you listen carefully, because I'm starting to give some really simple things you can do to go out to get really good deals. So that's a purchase option, the right to buy this property. Now let's talk about what is a purchase lease option. Well, it's very similar to a purchase option, but it's just got that extra word lease. So what does lease mean? Well, If you think about lease, if we lease something, we hire it, we rent it. And so we can pay a monthly option fee, a rental fee if you like, to the owner of that asset, but then we actually get to use that asset. So a purchase option might be on a piece of land or a building or a property. We don't get to use it because it's just a purchase option. But the purchase lease option is where we pay a monthly fee in addition, and then we get to use that asset. So it's perfect for properties that you could use as an HMO, for example, or as serviced accommodation, where you're renting out very short term and getting a much higher rent, renting it through Airbnb and Booking.com, etc. What this means is, with a purchase lease option, is that you can get cash flow, i.e. monthly profit, on a property that you don't actually own. So you pay the landlord a certain amount of money each month, and you rent it out for more money, and you get the difference. Obviously, there are bills and you want to pay those, but you get this money coming out on a property that you don't even own. Now, really, a purchase lease option, we want to get it for about 3 to maybe 7 years. It can be longer, but 3 to 7 years are typically the ones I and many of my students have actually done. In which time, as well as getting all this monthly cash flow, you might even get capital appreciation, i.e. the value of that property going up over time. So let me give you another little example. And I'm going to pick an example. Now, this is a few years ago, to be fair, but I'm doing this one because this was in London, and a lot of people think, well, these are great strategies, but you can't use them in a place like London. Well, look, you've got to be very careful what you believe. Henry Ford, who is the founder of the Ford Motor Company, he had a great saying. He said, if you think you can or think you can't, you're absolutely right. So if you've got these challenging things going on in your head, so, well, you can't do that, you can't do that, guess what? It's going to be right for you. You might want to open your mind and really think about this. So Charmaine was travelling around, she's based in Kent, she's travelling around southeast London looking for properties to buy. And she went past this one property that had a for sale sign, big property. She called the agent, she thought it might be a flat within that large property. It was a huge property. And actually, she was looking for student property. She realised in the area there was a real shortage of student accommodation. And so what she did was she spoke to the agent and found actually it was this whole building. Now, it had been on the market for a while for a couple of reasons. And when I explain the full story, you'll see why. But it was a pretty big building. Most people, it wasn't suitable for a home. It was bigger than most investors want to take on. It wasn't big enough for big developers. So it was kind of in this middle ground where there wasn't really much demand for it. And it was on the market for £900,000. Now, another really important thing, I'm going to share with you some great case studies, and I've actually got some video case studies we're going to see later on as well. And sometimes people are talking about big numbers. I want you to listen carefully, I want you to write this down. Most investors will look at properties based on the budget they have. Say that again, most investors will look at property based on the budget they have. And I completely understand it. So I'm going to buy this because I've got this amount of money to afford that. The problem is that you are limiting yourself to your own resources. When you understand a strategy such as options, actually, even if you don't have the money to afford to buy this kind of property right now, you can still control it and you can still make money from it. And I'll explain how. So it was on the market for £900,000. To buy that would require several £100,000 of deposit, which as a straight out purchase, if the numbers work, fine, that deposit could be someone else's money, but that would put most people off looking at a property like this. And by the way, this is worth to go. But the whole point is it was on the market and it wasn't selling. Now Charmaine went in, she thought actually it might work as a very large student HMO. And she spoke to the owner over several times and she tried to negotiate, trying to get the price down. He was really not motivated to sell at a discount. And whenever you speak to a seller, you need to really dig deep and understand what is important to that seller. Now, this particular gentleman was using this as an annex to a hotel. So on the other side of the road, he had a hotel, And this was an annex. So when the main hotel was full, he would use this to put extra people in. He didn't use it very often. And in fact, he was getting quite old. He was scaling down his hotel business. So the annex was hardly ever used. And it's just sitting there empty, costing him money and insurance and rates and things. So he thought, I'm going to sell it. Now, this guy, he had a daughter, and he had thought that his daughter would take on his hotel business, but she had no interest in doing that at all. And actually, it's something that happens as property investors. We think that we can build a big portfolio, we'll give it to our kids. Very often, my experience is that the kids don't want the property. They quite like the money, the cash flow, but they don't want the hassle, and they'd rather sell the property and have a big pile of cash. So very often landlords who might think they're going to pass properties on actually sell them. And we'll talk more about that in the future parts of this live masterclass. But anyway, the owner was deciding to sell this particular block. And what he wanted was, he decided that although his daughter wasn't interested in running a hotel business, he wanted to financially provide for her. So what he wanted to do was to sell this. There was no mortgage on it at all. He was going to sell it. He was going to pay the tax he'd have to pay because he bought it years ago for a lot less. So some capital gains tax there to pay. And the money was left over after the tax would be enough for him to purchase 2 rental blocks, 2 brand new apartments. He was going to rent those apartments out, give them to his daughter, by the way, rent them out, and she could keep the rental income. So he had a plan. He had an idea of what he wanted to achieve. So he couldn't take any less. Lots of people had offered him 600, 700. He just refused all those offers because he knew he needed 900 to follow his plan. So you've got to really understand, what does the seller want to achieve? When Charmaine understood what he was looking to achieve, she was able to come up with a win-win solution. And this is something I want to make sure you understand. When you're doing purchase options and purchase these options, as this particular one was, we're not trying to con people. We're not trying to pull the wool over someone's eyes. We're trying to find a great solution for this person. And you might be thinking, why on earth would someone do the next masterclass we do? Why would someone agree to do this in the first place? But this particular person, the solution that Charmaine offered to him was better than his current situation. His current situation was that no one was buying this property. And even if someone came and bought the property the next day, it would take several months to sell it and get the money, then several months to go and buy the next one. So he was at least 6 months away from being able to give that income to his daughter. So once Charmaine realised what he was trying to achieve, she found an alternative way of giving him what he wanted. She said this. She said, look, so if you had someone who was going to buy this property, it would take some time, but how much rental income would you get? And he said, well, I could buy 2 flats. They might make $1,250 a month, so I'd get about $2,500 per month. And I'll gave that to my daughter because I'll buy them in her name. That's enough for her to cover a living cost and have a reasonable lifestyle. Not bad if you've got a dad who wants to give you a couple of properties, right? And Charmaine said, okay, well, I guess that's the gross rental, the total rent. Is she going to manage herself? Oh, no, she doesn't want to manage. So Charmaine said, so you're going to have a listing agent? She said, well, he said, yes, we'll have a listing agent. So she said, well, realistically, it's not going to be 2,500. It's going to be more like 2,250 if you take off 10%. He said, well, yeah, I suppose so. And she said, what if there aren't any tenants in there? Is there a risk that, it takes a while to put tenants in once you own these? Is there a risk that tenants occasionally move out? I said, well, yeah, that's property. So the most she's ever going to get each month is $2,250, and she might not get that every month, depending if they're tenants or not. I said, well, yes, that's right. So Charmaine said, well, how about this? How about if I agree to buy the property at the price that you want? If you give it to me on the terms that I want. He said, well, what do you mean? Well, I will buy it from you, the full 900,000, but I just can't buy it right now. But what I'll do, in the meantime, every month until I buy it, I'll give you a guaranteed $2,250 250. So I'll give you the same amount of money that you would earn as if you had these two rental properties, but you get that amount guaranteed every single month. He said, well, that sounds interesting. And she said, rather than waiting 6 months to sell, let's get the money and go and find two properties, I'll start giving it to you in about 4 weeks. He said, why 4 weeks? He said, well, look, we want to do it properly through solicitors. We do all the paperwork. It'll take about 3 or 4 weeks. You could start getting this income in 3 or 4 weeks. I to take the hassle, the responsibility away from you. I will look after the property. I'll maintain it. In fact, I want to refurb it, spend some money improving the bathrooms and things. Is it okay if I spend money on your property that you still own? He said, well, yeah, that's fantastic. So she found a solution that worked for him, where all the other investors were just trying to get a discount, which she tried to do as well, but they weren't listening to what he wanted. So in this circumstance, and we're going to cover a lot more about this. You might think that's just a one-off. There are lots of people who do this. I'm going to cover this in detail in the next masterclass about why people would actually do this. But you can see, hopefully, in this situation, why this works really well for this particular seller. Now, you might be thinking, well, actually, that's a lot of money that Charmaine's going to have to pay every single month to that landlord. And yes, it is a lot. But what I haven't told you is this is actually a 17-bedroom student house. 17 bed. And it's 17 en-suites. Now, the en-suites were a bit tired. She had to spend £60,000 on a light refurb, just improving all of those, a bit of paint work. But she now rents that out, and she gets £100 per week per room. So she gets £1,700 a week, and she's only paying £2,250 to the landlord. If you're watching this video, if you're watching this live right now and you think that's a great deal, just type in deal below this video. That is a great deal, because after paying the landlord, after paying all the bills and the maintenance and the insurance and everything, Charmaine makes from this one property that she doesn't own. It's a purchase option, purchase lease option. She controls it. She gets cash flow. This one property makes just under £50,000 profit per year. That's from one deal. Now, this wasn't Charmaine's first property. She was new when she came to us, but she did a number, but this is one she did. But I want to show you just what's possible and remind you, this was in London. This was on the open market available for sale. It just wasn't selling. So when you find the right kind of properties and you understand the circumstances, you can get great deals. So that's a pretty good return. I'm sure you'll agree. So now let's go back to the slides and let's think about some of the long-term benefits of purchase lease options. You see, as well as the cash flow that we can get from this property on a monthly basis, the monthly profit we make on a property we don't own, we can also get the potential capital growth. Now, this is important because it means we can actually pay or offer to pay today's full market price. You see, most investors, we want to negotiate. We want to get a discount on the full market price, but we can afford to pay the full market price. Now, over time, generally, property prices go up. We know they don't always go up. The property market, like every other market, is cyclical. It goes up and it comes down. We live on this island with a limited supply of accommodation and an increasing population. So that means over time, property prices go up, rents go up, and obviously with all the money that was printed in 2020 because of the pandemic, I think most people realize we're going to see inflation in the UK, and in fact all around the world. We're going to see inflation. What that means is property prices and rents are generally going to go up because of that inflation. Now, the longer the option period, think about it, the more potential that property has to go up in value. So in other words, if we pay the full, or agree to pay the full market price today, over time as the value goes up, the price that we agreed to pay today, in 7 years' time, or 5 years' time, price have gone up, today's full market will be a discount on the future value. So we can actually give someone the full market price. And in the future, when we buy the property, we will be getting it at a discount. Now, in some circumstances, that equity growth can actually be used as a deposit. If you go to a normal mortgage broker, it can't be done. Typically, you'd buy it with bridging finance or private finance and then refinance it later. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail about that in future in this 4-part live masterclass series. And remember, you don't have to buy it if you don't want to. Now, if it's gone up in value significantly, it would be pretty silly not to. You might think, yeah, but surely I'm going to have to put money in, get a mortgage. Well, you could assign it onto someone else and just walk out with a profit. So this is giving you money in your pocket right now with a PLO and also potential profit in the future. By the way, the market might not go up, the market might come down, in which case you don't have to buy, you can walk away because you've got the right but not the obligation to buy. From an ethical point of view, I believe if you go into a purchase option, you should at least intend to buy in the future, but you don't have to. And also, if you do give a property back to the owner, make sure you give it back to them in as good as or better condition than when you first took it on. I think is only a fair thing to do. So, if you're liking the sound of these options, just type into the chat box below. Hopefully you watch us type in or into the Facebook group, I like options. If you like the sound of options, type in I like options. You've been watching for the last 50 minutes or so. Hopefully you realise just how powerful these are. But you might think, okay, so what's the catch? There's got to be some money involved. And yes, you do need some money. Now, the average purchase lease option costs between £5,000 and maybe £10,000. It does vary, depends very much on the deal. And let me tell you some of the things that you're going to have to pay to actually get this option. Now, by the way, in case you're thinking, but I don't have £10,000, it doesn't have to be your money. But let me explain what some of the costs might be. So first of all, you're going to have an upfront option fee. Remember, that's what you need to pay, at least £1 to make it a legally binding contract. It might be several £1,000s depending on the nature of the deal, but it's going to be at least £1. Then you may be sold you the deal, so you might be paying a sourcing fee. Maybe you bought it through an estate agent. We're going to talk all about how you can work with estate agents, because if you said to a normal agent, I want to buy it in 5 years' time, they would tell you to get lost, because they're thinking, I can't wait 5 years to get my commission. But in the third part of this masterclass, we're going to talk about how you can work with agents and actually get them to bring great deals to you. And the secret really is making sure they're actually going to get paid their fee in 3 or 4 weeks instead of 3 or 4 months. So there might be a fee to pay to an agent or a sourcing agent, or maybe you found it direct yourself. We'll teach you how to do that as well. But there could be a fee there. Then you're going to have legal costs. Now it's very, very important that you always use solicitors to give you and the seller independent advice, so they know exactly what they're getting into. Really, really important that. We'll talk more about that in future live masterclasses. You might decide to get a survey. Sometimes people like to see what's it actually worth at the time they buy, to show they are paying the full market price. That could be there. Some properties you can literally move in. Most properties need to do a little bit of a light refurb, maybe a little bit of a paint job, maybe clean the carpets, maybe put a little bit of new furniture in. Sometimes you have to do that. And so all of those things could add up to anywhere between £5,000 and £10,000. If you need to do a significant refurb on a property, you're taking it back to brick, spending 50, 60, 70, £100,000, an option might not be the most appropriate strategy. And so we'll talk about what you might do instead on one of the future live options masterclasses. And remember, it can be other people's money. I want to give you a little secret here, okay? Although sometimes there is some money required, it doesn't have to be your money. It could be borrowed. You can get such a high return on options that you can afford to give someone else a great rate of return. In fact, there's a commercial broker who we introduce to all my clients, and you can have a completely brand new business, and if you get an option deal, they'll look at the deal to make sure it's a good deal. But if there's enough cash flow coming out of it, you can have an unsecured loan. So brand new business, no track record, unsecured loan that will give you the money to cover all of the costs, and you can pay that back over 3 years from the cash flow of the deal. So again, if you know how to find really good deals, they can be literally none of your money required. We'll talk more about that in part 4 of this live options masterclass. Now, I want to step back just for a minute and go back to the slides for you. And I want to think about doing an option compared to a normal, straightforward purchase. Don't think you have to try and do options all the time, and options don't work all the time, but I just want to compare it with a normal purchase just for comparison's sake really. So let's say we're going to buy a £200,000 buy-to-let property, okay? Typically, we would need about £60,000 of cash to buy that £200,000 property. Why? Well, you'd probably get a 75% investment mortgage. So you're buying at 200, 75% would be 150,000, okay? You need to put in your 25% deposit, which would be 50,000, and your duty, which is the tax you pay when you buy a property, and your legal costs and things. So it's going to cost you about £60,000 in cash to add to the 150 mortgage to buy a £200,000 property. So 60,000 to buy one property. Now compare that to doing an option on a property instead. And that option might cost you, say, £10,000. So you could either one property, or you could take that same 60,000 and you could maybe buy 6 properties on option. That means you've got 6 times the cash flow, 6 times the potential capital growth. So which would you rather do? If I could do an option, even though I got the money to buy a property, if I could do an option, minimize the amount of money I put in and maximize my return on investment, I would always do that. Okay? Sometimes you see a property, just buying it outright is just a good thing to do. But if I could do an option, generally I would always try and do an option. Now, I want to just cover something that I mentioned very quickly, which is called ROI, return on investment. As an investor, we always want to maximize the return on investment we get. So I know we've got a lot of different people watching this training, some completely new, some experienced. ROI, what we do, we work out the annual profit. So, in other words, how much do we make each month, not in rental income, but in cash flow profits? After paying the mortgage, the insurance, all the bills, etc., how much do we actually make every single month? Okay, and on a good HMO, that might be £1,000 a month, let's say. We multiply by 12 to give us the annual profit. So that's the annual profit, let's say 12,000. Okay? Now, we divide that by what was the investment that was needed to acquire that property in the first place. So the initial investment. Okay? So how much do we make each year? How much do we need to acquire that property to give us that money each year? Then what we do, whatever that answer is, we multiply it by 100, that gives us a percentage. The higher the percentage, the better the return on investment. So to put this into context for you, in England, because I know we've got people from all over the world watching this training, by the way, options and purchase these options work all over the world. There are 1 or 2 places where you can't do it, and we'll cover those in later workshops, but there are other things we can do very similar to this. But in England, if we have a normal buy-to-let, single-let property around the country, typically 5 to 7% is an average ROI. If it's in London or the southeast, it might be 2 or 3%. If it's up north, you might just about hit double figures on a single-let property. If you had an HMO, a house of multiple occupation, you should get something like a 20% return on investment. That's the target you want to aim for. If it's fully managed, I'll be happy with 15, but 20, 25 is what I really want to go for. So that puts it into perspective. Let's say you were doing an option though. So you're not buying this property, but it's going to give you £1,000 a month, maybe as an HMO or serviced accommodation. And to buy this option, you had to put in £10,000. That's for your legals, it's setting it all up, etc. Well, the return on investment here, because we multiply this that comes out at 1.2, times 100 gives us a 120% ROI. 120% ROI. So options, purchase these options, because we don't have to put as much money in, because we don't have to put a big 25% deposit in, options can give us a much higher ROI. So this is why when we can do options, we want to do options. Now, my rule of thumb that I have is that if I do an option, I want to make sure I get at least a 50% ROI. What that means is I'd get all my money back in 2 years. I get half my money back the first year, half my money back. So in 2 years' time, I've got my initial investment back. In this case, on this deal, it's 120% return. That means we're more than getting all our money back in the first year, which is pretty good. So if we don't eventually buy the property, hey, doesn't really matter. So let's just try and summarize some of this. I'm going to go to some case studies. We're going to have plenty of time for live questions. I want to pull some of this learning together for you and talk about what are the real benefits of doing this purchase, lease option, and purchase options. Well, the first benefit is this. In reality, there is not much competition because most people just don't really understand it. There are lots of people who've heard about them. There are lots of people who've tried to do them, but they haven't done them correctly, and they then made the assumption that they don't work, but they just weren't doing them in the correct way. You do need to learn how to do them properly, but not many people are actually doing them, which is great because there's not much competition for you. You really do not need to use much money to do this at all. If you have lots of money, great, but at some point, everybody runs out of money. And if it's suitable, and remember, options don't work all the time, but if the circumstances are right, you can have a great win-win solution for you and the owner. You don't need a lot of cash to do it. This means the money you do have will go much further. Like the example of, would you like one property by putting 60K in, or would you like to do the same 60K to do 6 options? I'd rather have the 6 properties personally. You get a very high return on investment, ROI, because you're not putting a lot of money in up front. This can be done much quicker. This can be done much quicker than actually buying. If we're going to buy a property, it might take 3, 4, 5 months for that deal to go through until we can start cash flow coming in. Instead, we can use solicitors, get the paperwork done in 3 or 4 weeks, and have cash flow coming in much quicker. And that's really good for the seller who wants to get rid of this property. It's not going to take the normal time that a purchase would take. You don't need to be able to get a mortgage. So whether you've got lots of property already and you're a landlord, a portfolio landlord, or whether you're just starting out, you don't have the hassle and inconvenience of getting mortgages now. Now, if you eventually wanted to exercise the option and buy that property, yes, you would need a mortgage in the future, but it doesn't have to be you doing that. It could be in a company structure, it could be the joint venture finance. So don't worry about that. Just know you don't need to get mortgages right now. And it could be a real win-win. Look, if you've read my book, Property Magic, or you've done any of our training, you'll know that we talk about ethical win-win investing. We're trying to find people who are typically motivated, they've got a problem. We want to solve their problem, come up with a solution that works for them, but also really works for us. Why? Because if it's a win-win, it's less likely that deal's going to fall over. If you push too hard or try and persuade someone to do something they don't really want to do, there's a good chance that actually they'll change their mind. But if they are genuinely happy with what you proposed, it's far more likely you're going to get the solution that you want because you've given them what they want. So we're looking for the genuine, ethical win-win, which you can absolutely do with options. Now, what are the downsides? It can't be that good, Simon. Surely everyone would be doing this. Well, it's amazing how many people are not doing this because it's so powerful. But, to be really clear here, options don't work for most sellers. You might say, hang on a minute, Simon, I'm all excited. What do you mean they don't work? No, they just don't work for most sellers. And I'll tell you why. You see, most people who are selling a property, we're going to go into a lot of detail about this on the next live options masterclass we do, part 2. But just give you a little bit of information now. Most people selling a property, they're selling it because they want to access the equity in that property now. Maybe they want to pay off their own home mortgage, or maybe they want to invest in a business, or they want to pay for their daughter's wedding, whatever it is, they need the money now. So if you said to them, I'll buy it in 5 years' time, they're going to say, well, that's not going to work for me. And unfortunately, amateur investors, or even some experienced ones who don't learn about this properly, they go and try and use it when it's not appropriate, and they get knocked back. They get too many people saying, no, not going to do that. It's a big mistake people make. They're trying to use it when it's not appropriate. And they then conclude, oh, options don't work. Well, they do absolutely work in the right circumstances when done correctly. The other challenge is estate agents, solicitors, and general advisors that the sellers might have around them also don't get it. You know, if someone doesn't understand something, they're not going to want to enter into an agreement with you. And they might have a spouse or a friend down the pub, or that doesn't sound right to me, or even worse, a solicitor, accountant who's giving them financial advice, and they're not supposed to do that, by the way, and they're trying to protect their client, and just because they don't know about it, they think it seems a bit strange. So sometimes that's a problem. Professional advisors around people put people off. And sometimes you might get someone who's prepared to do an option, but just the numbers just don't work. You should, please write this down, it's really important. Do not do an option just because you can do an option. Sometimes people are so excited they found someone. It's got to be a good deal. There's no point in you doing any deal unless it is a great deal. Now, sometimes if a seller's got a property they really don't want, it's a real problem, and you're saying, look, I'll take it on, I'll pay your mortgage, I'll look after the maintenance, the insurance, I'll do it. Sometimes you get sellers literally throwing the keys at you, and sometimes they say, well, that's amazing, but I don't get it. Why would you do it? Why would you spend money on my property that I still own? Why would you? They don't get it. It's almost too good to be true for them. So that can be a problem as well. But here's the key one. The biggest problem, downside with options, is that you need to understand it and you need to believe it. If you, even after the next session where I'm going to explain to you why someone would want to do this, if you don't, in your heart of hearts, believe it's possible, you don't believe why it's good for the other person, it's going to be very difficult for you to get a deal. And it's one of the biggest things that's going to stop you moving forward, using these tools, if you don't believe it. So I'm pleased to say I'm going to help you with that. And you might be looking at me and saying, all right, so you've been investing 25 years, you know what you're doing, you can do it, how on earth could I do this? Well, I'm going to share with you some video case studies of people I've interviewed at some of my big events, my Property Magic Live and Strategy in Place. They're two big events we hold each year. And they're people just like you who have learned this strategy and have applied it. And we invite them to those big events and I interview them and really try and pull out the key learnings, because by seeing other people doing what you want to do, it means it's possible. If I was saying, hey, look, there's this great show, no one's ever done it before, but I think it will work. Well, get out of town, Simon, it's not going to work, right? But the fact other people have done this and are continually doing this and doing it right now means it's whether you choose to believe it or not, that's up to you. The fact other people are doing it means it's possible. And this will help build your bit. So these case studies we're going to share with you on each of these live option masterclasses are designed to really build your belief. And not only will you learn from what they've done and listen carefully, you're going to pick lots up from that, but it really will help you build your belief. Now I'm going to share with you right now some secret content. This bit is going to be edited out of the video replay. Why? Because I explained this earlier, the best one in the world, people might say, oh yeah, I'll get around to watching that video at some point, and they just don't do it. Because look, I bought things I haven't watched, because I'm busy, we're all busy, right? So I'm rewarding you for being live here right now. I'm going to do some secret content on each of these to encourage you to come and join live, because otherwise the risk is you might not watch the replay. So you're here right now, you know this is the live one because this is the secret content I'm going to share. I'm going to have some secret content in each one. And the key to getting options is making sure you're working with truly motivated sellers. People who want to get rid of a property. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this in future workshops. I'm going to give you a real golden nugget here right now. There are people who've got a property they want to sell, but actually they don't need the money right now. They just want to get away from the property, the hassle, the responsibility, the liability. So the secret I want to give you right now is the very best people to pick up purchase options and purchase lease options from are landlords. Landlords. You can buy them from homeowners, but landlords are the very best people to get options from. So rather than just going out trying to look for options generally, focus in on looking for landlords. Landlords who are looking to retire. I'm going to mention this a little bit later on. Big opportunity right now, because there are lots of them. But you see, often landlords, they're selling because they don't need the money, they just don't want the hassle. And often they're more commercially minded. They might have even done options in the past. They might get it and understand. Often they have the right kind of mortgages. They've got mortgages, they've got low interest rates, interest only. If you're paying the mortgage, that's what you want. Often they have multiple properties. Now here's another really huge tip. I want you to write this down. Every single seller you speak to, particularly landlords, you should always ask them this question. Write this question down. This can be worth an absolute fortune to you. This is why this is my secret content. I'm only sharing with people who are watching this live. A great question you want to ask. It's very simple, but it will help you do more deals. You say, do you have any more properties? Because you might be speaking about one particular property and ask her, do you have any more property? Now, they may or they may not, but if they do, the one you're looking at may or may not be a deal, but they might have others that might also be a great deal. The great thing about landlords, you can have just one landlord and pick up enough property on option from that one landlord to completely replace your income. So this is the little special bit I wanted to share with you just because you're here live watching this. I'm going to talk more about this in part 3 of this live masterclass. But this is such a simple concept that most people don't get it. Landlords are absolutely your best people to be working with. Okay, so how can you use this information that I've shared with you so far? Well, obviously you can control property before you buy it. You can get planning permission. You can fix things before you can buy it. You can add value to a property and flip it on to someone else without actually buying it. You can rent out property on a purchase lease option on a buy-to-let basis. You know, that can work. You can rent it out on a multi-let basis, an HMO or serviced accommodation. Maybe you can pick up an overseas polyhome. Because by the way, do you think there might be lots of people who have got properties overseas, they're not really using it, they thought it was a great idea to buy this holiday home, but actually they're not using it? You can pick it up and start using it as a holiday home yourself, renting it out to other people. You can upgrade where you live. Now just think about this for a minute. I've been talking about investment properties so ones to generate cash flow for you, but maybe there's someone who wants to sell a property and actually they wouldn't mind renting it for the meantime. So you can find these people. We'll talk more about this in the 3rd part of this masterclass. You find someone who actually would rent a property to you for a period of time, then give you the right to buy it. You could move into that. So you become what's called a tenant buyer. You're a tenant in the property, you've got the right to buy the property because you've got a purchase lease option in place. So what this means is, we've had a number of students, and I've done this myself, lived in a bigger house than you live in right now, in a better area, and sometimes actually paying less on a monthly basis to live in a bigger, better property. I've got one of my case studies is going to explain how that works, because it's a really powerful thing. And you can also dispose of property you don't want. You can sell properties to people. You might have properties you bought over the years. Like I've been doing this 25 years. I bought a few properties which, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't buy those again a second time. And I've been able to sell them at full market. So I've given an option to someone else. I've sold it at full market price. They've come in. They've taken care of the management. I've had no management fees. I've had no maintenance. I've actually made more on a monthly basis than I would just managing it myself with none of the hassle as well. So there are so many different ways you can use these strategies, and they are useful for all level investors, whether you are completely new to property. Once you get this, you can use these tools. If you're very experienced in property, you can use it. This works for everyone, and you're going to get a competitive advantage because most people just don't have this knowledge. And why are they perfect now? Well, look, options work in all market conditions. What I believe right now is the perfect storm, the perfect circumstances. Why? Well, it goes back to April 2017. The government introduced a change to the way that we as landlords are taxed. It's called Section 24. I'm sure you know about Section 24. Go and Google it. What it means is if you own property in your own name, which most successful landlords did because that was the most tax efficient way to hold it, and if you were a higher rate taxpayer, which most successful landlords are, and if you have mortgages, which again, most landlords have, so if you own in your own name, if you're a higher rate taxpayer and have mortgages, Section 24 means you're going to pay a lot more tax. Now, there are some landlords that move them into a company structure, they've done various things, but what this means is that actually there's a whole load of landlords for the last couple of years who have been selling their properties. And we can help landlords dispose of their property. Imagine you find just one landlord who's got all the properties you need to take on. By the way, if we're taking on options, we're not affected by Section 24. If we're buying them eventually in a company, again, we're not affected by Section 24. So we can take a property that's not working for an existing landlord, but it can work for us because we're buying it in a different way and controlling it on an option. So it's about getting your head around this and understanding that for the next probably 12 to 18 months, there are still landlords who are thinking what they're feeling the full effect of Section 24 now. It's fully into it. It'll take 4 years to phase in. They're feeling that now, and they are looking for a solution. And there are always people entering any market and people exiting, but for the next 12 to 18 months, there's going to be lots of landlords looking for a solution. This is why now is absolutely the time for you to be learning this and getting out and actually doing this. Now, after any boom, we've seen a booming market for literally the last 10 years, pretty much since 2010, and the last couple of years in particular. Then in 2020, we saw this incredible boom that was unexpected because of COVID and government stimulation of the market. But most people believe that when you have a boom, you have a bust. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. No one knows. But if the market does correct, if the market comes down, again, and people are struggling to sell, an option is a great solution for them. So this is why I think now is the great time to be getting this knowledge. Now, as I said, I want to inspire you, I want to bring this, make this really work for you. So I've got 3 case studies. We're going to go to video now. We're going to look at a case study, and then I want you to listen very carefully, take great notes, and then we'll come back and I'll pull out some key learnings for you. So the first one is actually about a purchase option, and it's at one of my big events. I got Stephen Ray to come and talk about this great deal. So I'm going to roll the video, listen carefully, and I'll pull some of the key learnings out for you. Let's talk about this deal and give us a little bit of background on how you found this property first of all, before I go through any of the numbers.
Okay, it's in the town I live. It's a classic town where, people say I can't do property deals because the prices are too high. So this is right under my nose.
Yeah.
I knocked on the door. It's just the place is a fantastic plot of land in a fantastic location in a tired-looking house. And I thought, well, there's got to be possibilities there somehow. So I just knocked on the door and said, if you ever want to sell, I'll be interested.
So this was not on the market,
No.
but you just went and knocked on it. Now, how many people would walk past the property, oh, that's great, but do nothing about it? Probably the vast majority. So actually, it takes a bit of guts to kind of do something about it, right?
But I did it again this week.
You've done it again this week. Well, you're getting some good results knocking on doors, aren't you?
Yeah.
Do you want to briefly tell us about this week? What happened?
I decided I wanted to look at Cambridge in a little bit more detail. I went to Cambridge Pin. I met Chris there for the first time. Where are you, Chris? And I was walking the streets. Say that how you want.
I thought you got into trouble last time for that, but...
And I went into this one premises, and the owner's daughter was there. We got talking, and they asked me back the next day to meet the mum, the owner. and the mum's been texting me this morning, and this is an equally large potential development.
Fantastic.
They've been approached by the developers, but the other developers are not doing the win-win scenario.
And that's the thing I like particularly about you, Steve. You really embraced our philosophy about it's got to be a win-win, and you try and see what do they want, what's important to them. Try and find a solution for them. If you give people what they want, they're far more likely to give you what you want. And you're a big advocate of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
So this was a property in your location. You literally knocked on the door. Would you be interested in selling it? And what was their reaction to that?
Yes, we want to, but maybe in a year's time.
Okay.
I said, okay then, I'll leave you my card. And then I was too embarrassed to go back and and ask them. And on the mastermind program, we get buddies. My buddy Neil Chowdhury kept on badgering me and said, "Have you been back? You've been back, Steve?" I said, no, I'm not sure what to say. In the end,
that fear in your head, which we all have.
That little voice.
Little voice, yeah.
So he pushed me, and I did go back about 4 months later, and I said, I don't know if you remember me, and he said, oh yes, you're Steve, I've got your card here, we're just about to ring you. We do want to proceed and actually sell our house. And so that's the start of the discussion.
Excellent, okay, and so obviously you just buying it, now, people might think, big development site, you can go and buy it, get planning permission, then develop and sell it. That would require a huge amount of money, but using a purchase option, you've got the opportunity to control the property, do what you need to do, and then buy it if you want to buy it. So
absolutely, it's the option and not the obligation.
Absolutely. So you've now it wasn't £1, it's £3,000 option fee.
That was the cost of their solicitors. So I've agreed to pay the cost of their solicitors, which is £2,400 plus VAT.
I'm guessing their solicitor hadn't done this before.
No, I recommended all the solicitors.
Okay, right.
So I'm actually paying
quite a lot for their. Or was it?
Yeah, it's a biggish deal. Their original quote was twice that.
Right,
so actually, once we agreed what the actual terms were, what they were doing, I was actually quite happy to pay that. It's a good.
Yeah.
It's not going to come back to me, Simon.
No,
it's a well-written contract.
Great. Okay. Good. And then obviously feasibility. So when you have a building or a piece of land, you need to work out what can actually be done on that. So talk to us a little bit about feasibility study.
Well, you can't really decide on what the value that the land could be without actually doing some feasibility of what you could put there.
Yeah.
And so I decided to commission some professionals to actually look at the various options: houses, apartments, flats, splitting the building, replacing with houses. I think there were 6 options, and we costed all of those 6 up. So they came out, they measured the land. So that's £5,000 including VAT. It's a lot of money, but I just got this feeling that this place was just obviously right for development. So, but it allowed me to work back to what I needed to buy the land for.
Yeah. So you look at the gross development value. So what could you put on here? What would that be worth? Work out what profit you need in it. And normally it's at least 20% profit, working backwards. Then work out, okay, what are all the build costs and all the professional fees, finance costs, and everything can work back to how much you can actually afford to pay for the land. So that's how you basically value what you can do with something.
Yep.
Okay, great. Now obviously your legal costs.
That's my legal costs.
Now, purchase price you agreed £1.4 million.
Yep.
Who sitting in the room before today might think they could never do a purchase of 1.4 million? Show of hands. You've also got more money than I thought, but this is how you do it. Okay, so 1.4 million agreed. Now, you said that other people had approached them, because other people identified it,
Yep.
and other people offered less, more?
1.5 million.
So someone else offered more money.
Yep.
But why did they want to deal with you?
They had an uneasy feeling about them.
Right.
I was just trying to get a win-win. I was trying to help them move on with their life. They opened up as to where they were going, what they were doing. So it's sort of all smoothed into one nice process.
But coming at it from that approach about really wanting to ask them questions and understand what's right for them and structure the deal that works for them, I think people sense that you're trying to help them, don't they?
Yeah.
They can pick it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But that discussion, on Mastermind, you get given coaches.
Yeah.
And my coach, you gave me Paul Collier.
Yeah. Who we're going to see in a moment.
Okay, who's probably the best. One of the best in the UK, and so actually Paul just helped me through this. It was phenomenal, and that's the benefit of the Mastermind program.
Absolutely. And the surveys now.
Done those.
Architects, you don't have to do that right now. So you've spent some money now to get it to the point.
Surveys, I've just done ecological, topographical, and arboreal. So
Yeah.
you have to do those for the architects to know where the building can sit.
Yes. Yeah.
We're going. The architects start on Monday. We go into pre-app 2 weeks on Monday, and then we go into full planning after that.
Fantastic. So not all of that planning cost, those architects, is going to be.
No, because a lot of that, in fact, most of the architects' costs are once you're into the real detail drawings, the actual schematics are actually about another 5,000.
So you can often get the initial planning, outline planning, and then you could sell it to someone with outline planning and they could do the detail, or you could do the detail yourself. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, but that's, so in other words, if you look at all the costs, and you wouldn't put in all the architect fees, but add it all together, about 66,000, I think. Which somebody might say, well, I don't have that money. Doesn't have to be your money. There's a lot of profit in this. You could do a joint venture or just do a loan, get other builders for cash in. So now, once you've got the planning permission, it's going to increase the value of the land, in this case, to £2 million, based on what do you think, what do you actually want to put on there? What's the best plan?
We've looked at so many options. We've looked at assisted living, looked at houses, townhouses, apartments. This town is very specific in the Warwickshire Shires as a place where you go to once you retire. That's its niche. So it was the first town in Warwickshire where Waitrose put a stall, for the reason you got lots of people with lots of time with lots of money. So it's going to be aimed at the downsizers retiring who wants an apartment dead central, bang in the middle of town, with a lot of beautiful security and trees around. So it's private estate, but it's the location. You walk out the door and you're straight into the middle of the town. It's phenomenal location.
So based on the end, what you're going to do, the NGV, the land's worth $2 million. Now here's an interesting point. Possibly. Or more, maybe?
Well, it depends what somebody's prepared to give you. So it'll be what it is, but that figures.
And it, obviously, you can get a risk valuation based on what you want to do, what they think it's going to be worth. Yeah. So here's the point. If you decide to buy this and move forward, because the land could be worth $2 million and you buy it for 1.4, that's 70%. You could come to someone like Crown Property, and in this case, Crown Property would give you all the money to buy it.
Well, actually, they helped me get this deal. I was at a property event. Crown Property got a stand there. And I was just explaining I was in discussions, very early discussions, and they said, would you like a letter of comfort, letter of intent? And I sent them my proposals, my feasibility study, this thing that I paid for, which is really, that's massively important to these people.
Yeah.
On the back of that feasibility study, the very next day, they gave me a letter that just said, we're prepared to fund this entire scheme. So on the Monday morning when I went for a meeting, as Paul Collier taught me, you've got to bring out their fears. And so I said, I bet you're wondering if actually I've got the capital to see this through.
Yeah.
I said, just to answer that, if that is a worry of yours, I've got this letter for you. And I just put it across the table and just said nothing.
Yeah.
And they said, great, right now, about the price.
Yeah, exactly.
So they helped me get it.
And give that confidence, because if someone's got a big house can take a long time to sell, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's one problem. They just put the market, and then also, there are a lot of idiots in property who look at things they just can't afford, and they don't know about these kind of strategies. And we all know they're out there, so they want to make sure that you guys aren't idiots. They want to make sure that you can actually deliver. So having that kind of support is pretty powerful, right?
It's phenomenal. It was a major part for me.
Gives that certainty. Fantastic. Okay. Now let's look at actually buying it, developing the land cost with the stamp duty on there, and the build costs, professional warranties, professional selling fees, etc.
So it's about £4 million.
Yeah. One thing is the finance cost is not on there. Yeah?
It's not. No. The one thing, anybody there who's checking me out has said you can't buy that plot for 85,000 stamp duty. It's actually one house and 2 apartments.
Right.
So you can
multiple dwelling relief.
Multiple dwelling relief.
Yeah.
In case you want to catch me out.
Yeah.
I'm sure Rich is trying to do it.
I'm going to ask you about that, but that's good. Okay. And obviously finance costs as well, depending when you finance it.
Yeah, I haven't included finance costs. I'm just the slide which is like the profit, as it were, it's for me, it's the stakeholders. So I
Yes.
include the finances in that.
Got it. So GDV, well over 5 million, and so all the stakeholders, so including the people in the money, 1.7, almost 1.75 million.
Well, I didn't take the highest GDV figure.
Right.
I brought it down slightly.
So it's kind of conservative.
Slightly.
Yeah.
It's going to take me a year to build, so I'm looking to be past Brexit on this one. I'm going to be trying to sell off plan as well for some of the others, so people can actually specify. Because this is luxury end, so people are going to want to put their own.
So that's really important. Just make sure everyone's got that. So when you're selling properties, rather than getting them all done, then putting it on the market and having all of them flood the market, it's a really smart idea when you're doing bigger deals like this to try and sell them off plans. You get some computer-generated images, CGIs, to what it will actually look like. And then you can work with some of the bigger, better estate agents, and they're people who want to buy these things. And the benefit for the buyer, they can come and exchange contracts. They do effectively an EDC. They'll exchange contracts, they complete when it's done. They put down a deposit, typically 10%, and they're then committed to buy. So it gives a lot of reassurance to the developer and also the financiers that obviously there's an exit strategy. And the reason people do it is, you're going to say, right, rather than getting a house that might not quite be right for you, if you put down your deposit, we will let you have a hand in how we actually finish it off. We might have 3 different kitchen ranges with a certain price bracket. You can pick whichever one you want. So someone gets a brand new property, but tailor-made to the kitchen they want, the carpets they want, the tiles they want, and it feels like their own, which means they're not all then identical, which is a really smart thing to do. And because they've exchanged, they're committed to buy. So obviously you're prepared to tweak it to them because they have to buy the property.
Well, you can make profit on that because they generally specify stuff. You say you've got this band of kitchens to buy, and they say, oh no, I want to go for that handmade one. Okay, that's fine, but that will cost you an extra 20,000.
And there's extra the add-on, yes, absolutely, yeah. So most of the guys who do this always make extra money by the upgrades. Because the people who've got to buy these high-end properties, they've got the money to do that.
Yeah.
And especially if it's their downstairs retirement, they're going to live here for life now. They want it to be a great property. Yeah. So that's a huge amount of profit to make. And actually, the amount of money that you're kind of putting in up front is £66,000 with the planning, the architect's fees, and everything. So who would be prepared to put in £66,000 if the profit, after taking out the finance and everything, was well over £1 million? So who'd be happy to do that? Yeah. Who didn't hear the question? Because again, if you think, but I don't have the £66,000, you've not been listening. It doesn't have to be your money. And is there a little bit of profit in there to maybe attract some other people in to get them to put the money in?
I'll go back to you guys if you find a deal.
Exactly. And come join the queue, Steve, because I'll get in as well, right? But here's the point, guys. How many people would not even bother to go and knock on the door? You got to think differently. You got to have the right tools. Could you just go and buy this for 1.4 million, Steve? Buy it and then get the planning first. You could do that. Some people do that, but that's not the right way, is it?
Risk.
It is a massive risk.
Yeah.
This is the way to massively de-risk this and make a huge amount of money. This is what I mean about maximising your profit from these kind of deals.
No, I haven't got 1.4 million.
No, you haven't. No, okay. Okay, so wasn't that interesting? A deal that there was no way Steve could buy because he didn't have 1.4 million, but he didn't let that limit him. So think about this, guys, because I want you to stop just looking at deals that are within your price range. Because with an option, as Steve did, he controlled that property. There's a whole load of stuff in there. He was able to get a letter of intent from Crabble. We're going to talk about that in one of the future videos to share how you can do that. And he was able to pay 100,000 less than someone else who's offering 1.5 because he knew how to speak to the seller, find out what was important to them, and find a great solution for them. And if he develops it, well over £1 million worth. But even if he doesn't develop it, he can just flip it on for £2 million, take off all the costs, he'd make a clear £500,000 profit just by flipping it for a 66,000 investment up front, and that doesn't have to be his money. So I just hope that's inspired you how powerful these options can be when doing bigger projects. Now, let's go to now obviously Steve's got some experience, done our mastermind program, etc. Let me go to the other end of the scale. You might think, oh, this is great, Simon, but I don't have property experience. How can I do this? I want to inspire you with the next case study, all about a purchase lease option, and we'll put out some of the keynotes. Listen very carefully. If this guy can do an option, you can do an option. Enjoy the video. Josh is going to talk to us about a phenomenal option deal he's done. How are you feeling about that, guys? Yeah. And the reason he's doing options, Josh, is because you can't get a mortgage yet. No. But I think who would want to buy you when you can do deals like you're about to see? So, Josh, started at a young age, obviously, and you came on our 3-day Mastermind Accelerator, and now helping out on Mastermind Local. And by the way, can we give Josh a mash bag? Because I know he's really nervous here. Okay, so because he's, you're 17, but we'll come talk in front of 250 adults. Is that okay? So yeah, just talk us through this deal. How did you find this property, Josh?
Well, at the time I was working down at M&S, big up M&S, and I got asked by my boss at the time. He asked me to take this woman round to shop with her, and her name was Joanna, and she was a lovely woman. And basically, you taught us at Mastermind Accelerator that we should tell everyone what we do, and yeah. I got speaking to her, and I took her around a couple of times, and I told her that I was getting into property and I was really interested, and she ended up saying to me, "Oh, my landlord's trying to sell his house. You should like speak to him." So I went and grabbed some paper. I jotted down his details and stuff, and I called him that night. And turns out I went to view it that week actually, and he was one of the nicest guys going. He was a really nice guy, and I spoke to him, and the house was brilliant though. It was in great condition. They were fully tenanted. Everyone there was happy, and I ended up talking to him about the options. About an option.
So what was the problem he had? He was looking to sell. Why was he looking to sell? What was the problem?
Well, he was in my eyes, he was the perfect example of a retired landlord. He just wanted to retire. He didn't want the hassle of going back and forth to the house.
So he was managing it full time himself?
Yeah, he was, yeah.
And he just wanted to stop doing that?
Yeah, and he wasn't living like near it either, so he just wanted to like be able to go on a nice holiday,
Without tenants calling him and...
Yeah, without the stress of having it. So...
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I guess people will get to a point where they just don't want to do it anymore, right? And I guess do you know how long he's owned it?
Oh, I think it was about 17 years, and
right.
A lot of the tenants there now have been there for around 10 years or so.
Right.
So they're
pretty happy tenants.
Yeah, very happy.
Okay, great. So you owned it a long time, probably had some really good growth, happy to just move on, but just didn't want the hassle. So you said, as he's struggling to sell it, you said, well, there's maybe something else we can do. And I suppose you're stepping in and solving the problem now, in terms of he can then walk away because you're taking on the management, and then buy it in the future. So what was it on for, and then what did you agree to buy it for?
It was on for 845,000, but
okay. Did he look at you thinking, how are you going to buy this house for 845,000?
Yeah, I get that quite a lot though. So yeah. I think it's good to create good rapport with people. So I was trying to like find common interest with him, and I was getting along with him the best I could. And fortunately for me, he already understood options because his father did options.
Oh, that's lucky.
Yeah, very lucky.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I spoke to him about the option. He was all up for it. So.
But I guess you didn't use the terminology option, did you?
Oh no, I didn't say the word option. At the start, I was like explaining what it was without saying the word option. He was like, "Oh, are you talking about an option?" I was like, "Right, yeah." Yeah. So
right.
it was on for 845, but
okay.
In order for it to go through, he would want 5,000 up front. So I said to him like, if we do it for if we do it for 845, we'll just knock off that 5,000 at the end.
Okay. So in other words, like I said, how much do we say is a minimum to do an option for? It's £1, right? But this was fully rented, and it was making him a profit, obviously. So he's not just going to give it for £1, is he? So that's why he wanted some money up front. So the option fee was 5,000, which you can negotiate to take off the end price. Okay. The only thing about an option, you can negotiate whatever you and the other party want. It's all about what you can agree between you. Okay. So so how many beds is it? And tell us about the rental and everything.
It's a 13-bed HMO.
Right.
And right now it's bringing in 5,400 a month.
Okay.
And
how much are you paying him?
I'm paying him 3,000 a month.
Right. Okay.
And I'd say like 800, 900 for bills.
Yeah. So again, a couple of thousand.
Yeah. So yeah.
Hang on a minute. Couple of thousand a month, 24,000 a year. You're earning more than your age.
I guess, yeah. Oh.
Well, what do your friends think about this?
Well, I don't speak to many of them about it, but
I'm not surprised. They might not believe you for a start.
I've just come from college actually, so if I look like a mess, I'm sorry, but I've just come straight from college, and a couple of my good mates at college, I talked to them about it, and they're really, really interested, and they want to come to PIN and stuff, so it's quite nice watching how enthusiastic they are about it.
Yeah, fantastic. And so, sorry, how long was the option period on this one then?
It's anytime up to 5 years.
Okay. And this isn't your only deal, is it?
Well, it's the only one. It's the only one I own at the moment, but I'm going through on another at the moment. But
yeah,
it's early days.
So it's not across the line yet.
It's not across the line yet, no.
Okay.
But this isn't an option. This one I'm doing now.
That's
my only option. This is a purchase.
Oh, so how are you doing that then?
Well, I have an investor, and it's all very complicated in my head right now. I've got loads of figures going around in my head.
That's okay. That's where we're going to go to it now, because we want to focus on options. But do you think, having got this first deal, but by the way, you can take people, show rounds, etc. Do you think that helps give you some credibility with potential investors?
Yeah, I think a lot of investors and a lot of estate agents take me a lot more seriously now, because I've viewed numerous houses. I'm sort of got used to it, so I sort of know how to talk to them and stuff. But at the start, they were sort of like looking at me like, it's a bit young, isn't he?
Yeah.
So where's he getting this money from?
Yeah, exactly.
So my investors trust me, so that's good enough for me if they trust me.
You obviously demonstrate you know what you're doing, which is good.
Yeah, I thought I was so happy when this went through.
Yeah.
And I've owned it for around a month, and it's all smooth sailing now. It was a bit of a struggle the first couple of weeks, not gonna lie, but now it's all fine. And I wanted to get this as soon as possible so I could have something with my name on it, so it would give me the confidence to strive to do more.
Yeah. And you know what, I really take my hat off to you, because not only is this great, but just sitting here and having a chat in front of all these people is pretty incredible as well. And say, picking up the phone and speaking to the agent, did you have some fear around that?
This one here, I actually didn't do it for an agent. I did it through Stephen. I did it privately.
Okay. So remind, how did you find landlords?
Through Joe. Sorry, because when I was taking Joe.
Yes, you said through the tenant. Yes.
Yeah, she told me about Stephen, and I spoke to him.
Yeah.
And then went around the property, got along with him great, and then ended up just sitting down at the kitchen table and speaking about the option.
So when you called the owner, the first conversation, were you pretty nervous about that?
I was absolutely petrified, not even gonna lie.
Yeah. But actually, isn't it interesting how sometimes we have fear, we're worried about things, but when you actually do it, you said he was a really nice guy, and he happened to know about, what's the chance of that, right? But it happens, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think it's just, instead of me trying to be someone I'm not, I've just got to relax a bit. Because at first, when I first spoke to an agent, I was sort of I was super nervous, and I was sort of telling him all my details. He was asking how much money I have, he was asking how much I make, and I was
Yeah, I'm 17.
Yeah.
I've just come out of college. I'm actually still at college. Probably not what the agent really wants to hear from, is it?
Yeah, he wasn't impressed. He didn't call me back either. Shockingly.
Shocking, yeah. Have you taken him around the house yet?
What, that agent?
Because you should do.
I actually did speak about it to my mum about that. So
Yeah, you should do.
I should.
You should definitely do that. I think so. I don't know what else to ask really. I'm just amazed, aren't you? Yeah. And how are you finding? Yeah, give me a round of applause. Another one. So, you know what? If a 17-year-old can do it, I mean, he's a lovely guy. He's a bright guy. He's just followed the process we taught him. But the point I'm trying to make here, if a 17-year-old can do this, who was petrified speaking to that, he just followed the process. There's nothing to stop you doing this. Unfortunately, there are no excuses. There's nowhere to hide if a 17-year-old can do it in a place like Oxford, which is quite a hot market, and pick up an HMO. And actually, I think we said it was about two. Actually, after that was a while ago. After all the expenses, about £1,500 he makes every single month. So £1,500 is 18,000 a year, and he was 17 when he got that. So he's still earning more than in his age, if you like. And he has gone on to do other options. He has used those as credibility to show investors round, to actually get funds and actually start buying property. So it's about getting your foot on the ladder. And he was completely new. But I think even experienced investors could realise, rather than buying that property for £800,000 plus, why not get an option on it instead? And it comes down to understanding why on earth would the owner do this. So that's really what we're going to focus on in the next masterclass. Because if you don't understand that, if you can't see the benefit for the other people, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to actually do any of these options. And I think you're going to be missing out massively. Now, I had planned to do a third case study today. We'll do it in one of the other workshops because I'm just conscious of the time. And I see we've had people asking questions on the various platforms it's on. So we've got people watching on YouTube and in our Facebook groups. And just for everyone, I'd encourage you to come and register on optionsmasterclass.co.uk. If you come and register, you'll get access to the recordings of this. It's going to be available just for a few days. Also, you'll be able to download the notes, the slides that go with this as well. And also, they're going to be, on the next couple of masterclasses, some extra downloads of some cheat sheets and things like that. So go and register one. There should be a link just below the video for you to be able to go and join that and get access to everything I've just mentioned. So I really encourage you to do that if you haven't already registered. Once you do that, you will also get a link to come and join our private Facebook group where we'll be sharing photos and talking about things. And if you're in the Facebook group, by the way, if you're already registered on that site, we're going to put a little post up saying, what's your key learning? And you know, it's what we call the network learning effect. By sharing, articulating your key learning from this live masterclass on that Facebook post, it's making you think about and articulate, so you're going to learn it better yourself. So this is not only helping you learn, but by sharing that key learning in that group, just go into the Facebook group and look for that post. It also means that you can go and read all the other posts that other people do, pick up their key learnings as well, and just really reinforce all the learning from this masterclass. So we haven't quite finished yet. I'm going to come to live questions in a moment. I'm going to go to Dan and ask him to pick out some of the questions being coming through. So if you've got questions you're watching, now is a great time to type those in. We may not have time to do all of the questions, but we can do some of them within the Facebook group over the next few days for you. But also, if you've got a question, come and ask that, and it might kind of pull a few questions together if people are asking similar things. Before we go to those questions though, let me just share with you what we're going to do in the next masterclass. The key point we're going to cover, as I said before, is why on earth would someone agree to do an option in the first place? So we're going to cover that. We're going to talk about what are the circumstances you're looking for that means maybe an option isn't appropriate. Because I said earlier that an option does not work in every circumstance. And the biggest mistake that most people who know a little bit about options is they try and use an option all of the time and it's just not appropriate. So I'm going to share with you the next masterclass, live masterclass, exactly what are the circumstances you need to look for so you know it's an appropriate strategy to use. And also, how can you make this a real win-win for everybody who's involved? We're going to share some more inspirational case studies with you to show you that if these people are doing it, you can absolutely do it as well. And also there'll be more time to answer your questions at the end. And by the way, if you don't have questions, just listening to other people's questions, because you'll get some key learnings from there as well. And we've just started to scratch the surface with what we've covered so far. With that in mind, Dan, I'm going to come over to you. And so thanks for sitting there, Dan, taking lots of notes and participating. Just pick out, we'll just do a handful of questions, Dan. What do you think are the most relevant ones that might help most people listening in today?
Well, thank you so much for all the content. First of all, Simon, and a number of people have commented on how content loaded it is for the first of the 4 sessions. Got one here from, I'm going to tie 2 together, from David and Noel. Really enjoying the masterclass. Presumably on purchase lease options, you can't get lending on that property.
Yeah,
Nor,
so,
hang on. They're sharp on the questions today. Nor can you apply for a renovation grant,
Okay.
etc.
So let me cover that. Remember, when we do a purchase lease option, the property stays in the name of the owner of that property. It's their property, and you have control of that property and a right to buy the property in the future. You would not be able to get traditional lending because you don't actually own the property. And not often when you get development finance, they often want to have a charge on the property as well. However, one of the things we introduce to my clients, there is a commercial broker who, when you have an option, depending on the figures, and depending how much of a refurb you need, so you can sometimes get an unsecured loan in your property business to do an element of refurb if there's enough cash flow to pay that back over a 3-year period. It's quite a high interest rate because it's an unsecured loan, right? But again, there is always a way of doing that. Now, there's one thing that's a great, maybe they're talking about if you have an empty property, and one of the reasons a landlord might give you their property is maybe it's been empty for a while, maybe it needs work doing to it in order to get people into it, and also they don't have the money to do it themselves. That's might be why they prepared to do an option. We'll talk more about this in Masterclass 2. If you have a property been empty for a couple of years, in some areas you can get an empty home grant, which is actually a gift, if you like, a grant. You don't have to pay it back to renovate that property and bring it back up to scratch and provide accommodation for people in the area. Now, if you don't own that property, you probably can't get that. But working with the owner, you could probably still access some of that money, but you need to agree that with the owner in the first place. And I think the owner would be up for that because at the end of the day, you're spending money on a property that they still own until the point you actually buy it. So it's in their interest. If you decide not to buy it, they've just had a load of improvement done on their property. So I don't think it's impossible. You just need to work with the owner about that.
That's a real key point to pick out, isn't it? It's giving an advantage to the current owner if you're doing that work for them.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we've got some great questions here. To run a serviced accommodation on a purchase lease option, they're getting a little bit technical here. What would you need to do to ensure it's in place to be able to run it as a serviced accommodation legally?
Okay, great question. So service accommodation is a fantastic strategy. Again, you need to learn how to do that. And what you need to remember is that a purchase lease option is not really a strategy in itself. It's just a tool that you can use to control property. So whether you're using it for an HMO or service accommodation, it's just a way. So whatever you would do normally for service accommodation, if you were buying a property, it was exactly the same for service accommodation on an option. So some of the things, it's slightly off topic, but I will answer because the questions come up. You need to make sure that the mortgage is appropriate. One of the challenges with service accommodation is that although as a concept it's happened for many, many years, it's become a far more popular concept over the last, say, 10 years maybe, and a lot of lenders have not really caught up with it. So most mortgages are not actually appropriate for service accommodation, and the landlords are kind of using it like that without telling the mortgage company. Now, technically you're breaching mortgage terms and conditions. Obviously, you need to decide if you're happy with that. What's most important is to make sure that the property is insured correctly. Because if you're using a property in a way that's not supposed to be used and you're not insured properly, you wouldn't be covered. So insurance is very important to protect the building and also to protect the tenants and yourself to make sure things are covered in case something goes wrong. So finance is an issue, whether you buy it or have an option. The other thing is you need to check the lease. Now, if it's a freehold property, it's not a problem. If it's a leasehold property, you need to make sure, is there anything in the lease that prevents the owner of that property using it as service accommodation? In older properties, it's not normally an issue, but in modern properties, last 5 years or so, they might specifically state something in there that they don't want short-term accommodation. And that's because if you have people who are living or renting there, if people are coming, going, there's a higher frequency of people, potential strangers, potential for noise and parties, so many freeholders have decided that's not available. So again, that's the same, whether you buy it or do an option, you need to check the lease. And then also, finally, depending how you're using the property, you need to check that you have the correct planning permission for that use. Now, if you're using it just as residential and it's an apartment or a house, it's C3 classification, that's probably okay. But if it's a B&B or an HMO, it's a different planning classification, you need to check you're using it correctly. But as I said, the option is no different from if you actually buy the property, you still need to make sure the same things are in place.
Gotcha. A great question here. What documents would you need to be able to actually perform a purchase lease option or implement?
Great question. I'm always asked that, and here's the thing. So I think in one of the masterclass, I think it might be the third masterclass. The reality is that there's only one document you need. I'm actually going to give that to people who tune into the third live masterclass. What you do is you take that document and then you get the solicitors to put together legal paperwork for you. It's very important you get proper representation for you and the seller. And I always can spot an amateur investor when they say they want a template contract because they want to do a copy and paste. And understanding, maybe they're trying to save money, that is not the thing to save the money on. Here's why. When you get an option agreement, an option is a bit like a blank piece of paper. It can be anything that you and the seller agree it to be. And so, whilst you might have 90% of it might be based on another one, it's the 10%. The 10% detail that needs to be correct. And you go to a solicitor who's got experience to make sure that it correctly protects everyone who's involved in that deal. So it's very important to make sure that's done in the right way. And if the solicitor makes a mistake, they have professional indemnity insurance, so you can sue them to compensate for any problems. If you do it yourself, there's no one you can sue, and it's really your own tough luck. And I highly recommend, we're going to talk about this more in future masterclasses, but I highly recommend that you and the seller have your independent legal advice to make sure things are done correctly. We'll probably take just maybe one final question, Dan, if there's one.
Can I sneak in a real quick one? Because it's a killer question. I just love this. Does the monthly option fee on a purchase lease option come off the end purchase price? I mean, someone's really thinking forward there.
Absolutely. We could talk a lot about that. And again, remember, it's a blank piece of paper. You agree what you want. One of the options I did, I actually found a property in Edgbaston in Birmingham. I moved in as a tenant buyer with my partner at the time, and we negotiated that actually the monthly option fee we paid, bar £50, came off the end purchase price. So that was partly what we negotiated. But it really does depend on, well, how much you're actually buying it for. Is there enough scope between what the mortgage that needs to be paying and the price you're buying at? Is there enough to allow you to actually do it? So every deal is dependent. There are many deals where nothing comes off on a monthly basis. You just pay the end amount. And again, remember, every deal is negotiable, and we'll talk a lot more about that. I think on module on number 2 or 3 live workshop. So Dan, I'd like to thank you for picking out those questions. Well picked, some great questions there. I'm going to have more time on the next few live masterclass to answer your questions, but I just want to get you into the spirit. So I've got a lot I want to share with you, a lot of content, as you've seen from watching this. We've got a lot more detail to go through, but I would love to get your questions. So if you're watching this in our, if you're in one of the groups, come and type in some questions. We're going to put a post in our Facebook group saying, hey, what questions have you got? And I'm going to pick up some of those questions and answer those in the next few masterclasses for you. If you haven't registered yet, go to optionsmasterclass.co.uk. Come and register. It's completely free of charge. You'll get access to the recordings of these. Remember, I'm going to cut a little bit of content out. The secret content is only available for people who watch it live. And believe me, you want to get that because it's a little extra bit that's going to make all the difference. It's completely free to participate, but people who are live will get the extra bit of content. If you're watching the recording, you might want to come and watch the next one live. And get into the Facebook group, ask questions, share your key learning, connect with people there who are all over the UK and all over the world who are using these incredibly powerful tools. So that's pretty much it from this one. I'd like to thank you. I know, spending your time watching this, there are lots of other things you could be doing. But I sincerely believe if you watch each of these masterclasses and apply what I'm teaching you, this could be an absolute game changer for you. We're doing this completely free. We would normally be selling some of this for a couple of £1,000. And I want you to imagine that you have paid £2,000 to be participating in this. Because then you're going to take it seriously. When people pay, they pay attention. This is such valuable information. It would be a crying shame if you didn't use it to further your property investing and to help people who need to get rid of their properties. So that's it from me. I'd like to thank Dan. I'd like to thank you for listening in live. Or if you're watching the recording, thanks for watching. And I look forward to seeing you on the next live masterclass. Until then, remember to invest with knowledge, invest with skill. I'll speak to you very soon.